It was 3 a.m., and the fog was thick enough to swallow the world whole. Alex's headlights barely pierced through the dense mist as he drove along the winding, desolate road, the kind of road that only appeared on the edges of a map, somewhere between nowhere and nothing. He had been on the road for hours, his gas gauge flirting dangerously close to empty. A quick glance at the GPS told him there were no towns for miles. He cursed under his breath, knowing he'd need to find somewhere soon or risk being stranded. Then through the fog, he saw it. A faint glow of red, almost like an invitation, shimmered through the mist. It was a gas station, standing alone in the middle of the empty stretch. The sign, flickering slightly, read, "Last stop gas and grub." The neon lights buzzed in and out of focus, but it was enough to give him hope. Without hesitation, he swerved onto the gravel lot and parked next to the pumps. The station was completely deserted, not a car in sight, not a soul in the convenience store. Alex's shoes crunched against the gravel as he walked toward the pump. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the eerie silence that hung in the air. He squinted at the building, noticing the faint outline of a small convenience store in the corner of his vision. The windows were dusty, their surfaces cracked from age, but the sign still glowed bright red, taunting him in the fog. "Well, better than running out of gas," he muttered to himself, but there was a chill in the air that made him shiver. It was more than just the temperature. The place felt wrong, but he was too tired to care. He slid the nozzle into the tank and began filling up. The rhythmic hiss of the fuel was the only sound breaking the silence, and even that seemed muffled in the heavy fog. Alex's eyes drifted back to the store, where the glow from the neon sign cast an unnatural light against the fog outside. As the tank filled, Alex thought he saw something moving in the reflection of the store's window. He whipped his head around, but there was no one. The lot was still empty. He shrugged it off, trying to ignore the rising unease in his stomach. Then out of nowhere, a cold hand gripped his shoulder. His heart leapt into his throat, and he spun around, his breath catching in his chest, but there was no one there. He stood frozen, his eyes scanning the darkness, but nothing moved. Not a sound, not a whisper. His hand instinctively went to his shoulder, the sensation of coldness lingering there as if the hand had never truly left. "Get a grip, Alex," he told himself, shaking his head. It was just his imagination, the exhaustion playing tricks on him. He had been driving for too long. He turned back to the pump, determined to finish what he had started, but something felt off. The air was different, heavier somehow. The fog seemed denser now, almost suffocating. He grabbed the nozzle and finished topping off the tank, then stepped back, looking around again. This time, his gaze fell on the CCTV screen hanging inside the convenience store, flickering in and out of view. His blood ran cold. On the screen, there were multiple versions of him. They walked through the aisles of the store, each one moving in slow motion, appearing and disappearing as if they were reflections in a broken mirror. Alex's stomach twisted in horror. He hadn't seen anyone enter the store. How could there be multiple versions of him wandering around? His first instinct was to leave. But when he turned to get back in his car, the road wasn't there. Instead, it curved in on itself, leading him right back to the gas station. He blinked, rubbing his eyes, but the scene didn't change. The station still loomed ahead, its neon sign flickering like a taunt. "Okay, this is ridiculous," Alex muttered under his breath. He was starting to feel lightheaded, like the air was pressing down on him from all sides. He turned his car around again, determined to drive out of this bizarre loop. But no matter how far he drove, he always ended up at the same gas station, the same pumps, the same eerie neon glow. The fog never lifted. Desperation clawed at him. He slammed his hands on the wheel, cursing, but when he glanced up, his headlights revealed the same station, waiting for him, unchanged. He stepped out of the car once again, his heart racing. The fog had grown thicker, the atmosphere even more suffocating. He hurried back inside the convenience store, seeking refuge from the unnatural loop he found himself in. The inside of the store was even worse than he had imagined. The aisles were cluttered with boxes, most of them torn and old, their contents spilling out onto the floor. Dust hung thick in the air, and the only sound was the buzz of the flickering light above him. He stumbled through the aisles, his eyes scanning for anything that could explain this madness. Then he noticed something that sent a cold chill down his spine. On the back wall of the store, tucked between some shelves, was a newspaper rack. But the papers on display were not current. No, these were old, very old, yellowed, brittle, their edges curled with age. He reached for one, his fingers trembling as he pulled it out. The date read 1975. His eyes widened. Why were these newspapers still here, untouched after so many years? He opened one of the papers, his mind racing. The headline screamed at him, "Gas station burns down. Sole survivor claims it feeds on the lost." Alex's breath caught in his throat. The article told the story of a fire that had consumed this very gas station years ago, killing everyone inside. But there was one survivor, a man who claimed that the station wasn't just a place for fuel. It was a predator, feeding on the souls of those who wandered too far into its grasp. It feeds on the lost. The words echoed in his head, the meaning settling like a weight in his chest. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He dropped the paper, his hands trembling. Was this real? Was he stuck in some kind of hellish loop? A trap laid by this cursed station? As if on cue, the CCTV screen flickered again, and the multiple versions of Alex were back. Only this time, the versions weren't wandering aimlessly. They were all looking at him, their faces twisted in silent screams, their eyes hollow and pleading. A voice whispered from behind him. "It's too late." Alex spun around, his heart hammering in his chest. There, standing in the doorway of the convenience store, was an old man. His clothes were singed, his face pale, his eyes wide and unblinking. "The station. It feeds on the lost," the man repeated, his voice hollow. "You're already part of it now." Before Alex could respond, the man stepped forward, his eyes locking with Alex's. A wave of dizziness hit him, and he staggered back, the store spinning around him. "Get out! Get out now!" A voice screamed in his mind, but it was too late. The lights flickered one final time, and everything went dark. The next morning, when the fog had lifted, a new car sat at the pumps of the abandoned gas station, its engine still running. The convenience store was empty, its doors wide open, as if inviting someone inside. A cold breeze blew through the lot, carrying with it the scent of gasoline and ash. But there was no sign of Alex. The station waited for its next visitor. The storm had come out of nowhere, roaring through the trees like an animal on a rampage. The sound of rain hitting the windshield was deafening, and the wipers couldn't keep up with the sheer volume of water cascading down from the dark heavens. Amber and Luke sat in silence, their breaths heavy and fogging up the glass, the headlights barely illuminating the narrow road ahead. "This is bad," Luke muttered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I can't see a damn thing." Amber glanced at the map on her phone, but the signal had long since disappeared. The night was thick with darkness, and the road twisted through the forest in ways that felt unnatural. She'd been quiet for the last few minutes, but a creeping sense of unease was starting to gnaw at her. She'd been trying to ignore it, but the atmosphere was stifling, like something unseen was watching them from the trees. The thunder cracked, loud and jagged, shaking the car as if the sky itself was splitting open. "Maybe we should pull over, wait it out?" Amber suggested, trying to keep her voice calm. The tension between them had grown in the past few hours, and neither of them was in the mood to argue. Luke didn't respond immediately. He stared through the windshield, scanning the dark outline of trees, looking for a sign, any sign of civilization. Just as Amber was about to speak again, something caught his eye. "Look," he said, pointing ahead. Through the rain-soaked windshield, a flickering neon sign came into view, just barely visible through the trees. Its dim red glow pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. "Whisper Pines Motel," Amber read aloud, trying to make sense of the strange name. She had never heard of it before, and the idea of stopping at some remote motel in the middle of nowhere didn't sit well with her. But what choice did they have? The storm was getting worse by the second, and it didn't look like they'd find shelter anywhere else. Luke's eyes narrowed as he slowed the car down, turning onto a narrow gravel driveway. The sign above them continued to flicker. The car's headlights revealed the shape of a long, low building, the kind of motel that looked like it belonged in a forgotten corner of the world. As they pulled into the parking lot, Amber noticed how still the place felt. There was no sign of life, no lights coming from any of the rooms. The only sound was the relentless downpour. They climbed out of the car, the rain soaking them in seconds, and hurried to the door of the lobby. The wooden door creaked open as they entered. The smell of dampness and something else, something faintly metallic, hitting them immediately. The air inside was cold, too cold for the summer months. Behind the desk sat an elderly man, his face wrinkled and pale, as if he hadn't seen sunlight in years. His eyes, though, were unsettlingly sharp, as though he were sizing them up in a way that made Amber feel uneasy. "Welcome to Whisper Pines Motel," he said, in a voice that was soft and calm, almost too calm. "I see you've been caught in the storm." Amber nodded. "We just need a place to stay for the night." "How much for a room?" The old man smiled, a slow, eerie grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Room 6 is available," he said, his voice dripping with an unnatural politeness. "And it's on the house tonight, free of charge." Amber exchanged a look with Luke, who shrugged. They were both exhausted, and it didn't seem like they had much of a choice. "Thank you," Luke said, trying to hide the discomfort in his voice. "But there is one thing you should know," the man continued, his voice dropping lower, as if sharing some ancient secret. "Do not look into the bathroom mirror after midnight. Do not." Amber and Luke froze for a moment, exchanging puzzled glances. "Why?" Amber asked, her curiosity piqued. The old man's eyes flickered, and for a second, Amber could have sworn she saw something otherworldly in them. But it passed quickly, and he straightened, his usual calm demeanor returning. "It's not something I would wish on anyone," he said cryptically. "But you've been warned." His lips curled into that unsettling smile again. They nodded politely, unsure what else to say, and the man handed them a key for room 6. The key itself was old, its metal tarnished and worn, as though it had been passed down for generations. The motel was silent as they made their way to the room. The only sound, the steady rhythm of the rain hitting the roof. The hallway was dimly lit, with peeling wallpaper and flickering lights. Amber felt a chill crawl up her spine as they walked. The place had a heavy, suffocating feel to it, like the walls were closing in. When they entered room 6, it was as though the outside world didn't exist anymore. The room was cold, even though the air conditioning wasn't on. A faint, musty odor lingered in the air, and the bed was neatly made, the sheets pristine. The bathroom door stood ajar, and in the mirror, Amber noticed her own reflection staring back at her, blurry and distorted, as if the glass had seen better days. "I'll grab us some towels from the front desk," Luke said, breaking the tension. "You can get settled in." Amber nodded, relieved to have a moment to herself. As soon as Luke left, she went to the bathroom. The mirror was still there, old and fogged up. She wiped it with her hand, revealing her reflection. Her pale face stared back at her, but something was wrong. Her lips seemed to twitch upward in a smile, but Amber hadn't moved her muscles. She froze, her heartbeat suddenly thumping in her ears. The smile on her reflection grew wider, impossibly wide. Amber stepped back, but her reflection stayed rooted in place, grinning like it knew some dark secret. Suddenly the air grew colder, and Amber could see her breath fogging up in front of her. The lights flickered and the temperature dropped even further. Her reflection blinked, but she hadn't. Panicking, she slammed the bathroom door shut, the sound of her breath coming in shallow gasps. She backed into the room, her eyes darting around. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But before she could process anything, the door to the room creaked open, slowly, by itself. The wind howled outside, but there was no breeze in the room. Amber stood frozen, her mind struggling to connect the dots. And then the whispers began. Soft at first, like distant voices from behind the walls. But as the seconds ticked by, they grew louder, more urgent, as if they were trying to communicate with her. "Get out," they hissed. "Leave now, before it's too late." Just as she was about to open her mouth and call for Luke, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The lights flickered again, and this time, the whispers grew into full, guttural voices. The walls seemed to pulse as if they were alive. The room was spinning now, or was it her mind? A sudden thought pierced her panic. They were trapped. She couldn't shake the feeling that the motel itself wasn't just abandoned. It was waiting for them. And they weren't the first guests to wander into this cursed place. She turned toward the desk drawer, hoping to find something, anything, to explain what was happening. Inside there was a stack of old photographs. Guests who looked strangely familiar. She picked one up, her blood running cold when she saw the people in the picture. Luke and herself. The photo was dated decades ago. The whispers intensified. The room grew colder, and Amber felt the walls close in on her, as though the motel itself was pulling her into its dark, twisted embrace. The door opened again. But this time, it wasn't Luke. It was the receptionist, smiling that same unnerving smile. Behind him, the hallway stretched into an endless black void. "It's time," he said, his voice filled with an unsettling warmth. "You're just like the others. Welcome home." Amber tried to scream, but no sound came out. The walls were moving now, swallowing her whole. The motel didn't just house the living, it collected souls. And now, they were part of it. They were just trying to save time. 4 friends, Jake, Erica, Marcus, and Lena, were road tripping across Nevada, heading to a summer music festival in Los Angeles. The GPS blared about traffic and detours, so Jake, ever the adventurer, suggested a shortcut. Route 311, an abandoned desert highway nobody used anymore. "I read this used to be part of the old interstate," Jake said, swerving the car onto the dusty path. The sun blazed overhead, distorting the landscape with shimmering heat. Cacti stood like sentinels, and the cracked road stretched endlessly through barren nothingness. Marcus, sitting in the back, raised an eyebrow. "I don't think this road's even on the map anymore." "That's what makes it a shortcut," Jake laughed. They didn't speak much after that. Just music, heat, and the rhythmic hum of tires over crumbling asphalt. Then came the children. Jake slammed the brakes so hard the car fishtailed. Lena screamed. All 4 stared through the windshield, their mouths going dry. 3 children stood in the middle of the road. They looked around 7 to 10 years old, pale skin, tattered clothing. Barefoot, they stood perfectly still, shoulders hunched, faces expressionless. But their bice, God, their eyes, solid black, no whites, no pupils, just void. Jake slowly rolled down his window. "Hey, you kids okay?" No response, not a twitch, not a blink. "Where are your parents?" Erica called out, leaning forward. "Do you need help?" The children didn't move. Then in the blink of an eye, they were gone, vanished. No dust, no footsteps, just emptiness. Silence filled the car like smoke. "Did you guys see that?" Lena whispered. Jake didn't answer. He just put the car back in drive and kept moving. Faster now. No one spoke for the next hour. They passed no other cars, no signs of life, just that dead road, and the sun slowly bleeding into dusk. That night, they camped just off the road, in a dry basin surrounded by scrub brush. No one wanted to admit they were shaken, but no one laughed or joked like they usually did. As the others set up the tent, Marcus stepped away to pee. He never came back. They called his name for hours, searched with flashlights, sprinted along the highway, shouting until their throats burned. No sign of him. Just something new. Lena found it first, on the cursed rear window. Scrawled in something dark and crusted were the words, Marcus. The letters were jagged, scratched in like claws, stained with dried blood. Jake tried to scrub it off with water. It didn't budge. The next morning, they drove in silence, hoping to find a ranger station or a gas station, anything. But the road just wound deeper into nowhere. The heat felt more intense, the air heavier. Erica sat curled in the back seat, pale and shaking. "I saw something last night," she said, before Marcus vanished. Jake looked in the mirror. "What did you see?" "They were watching us from the ridge. The kids, same ones from the road. Just standing there, staring." Jake gripped the wheel. "You were probably dreaming." "No, Jake." Erica's voice cracked. "One of them smiled at me, like they were waiting." That night they camped again, too exhausted to drive further. They left the tent flaps open, flashlights nearby, keeping watch in turns. Jake insisted they stay awake. Only 2 made it to morning. Jake woke up just before sunrise, heart pounding. The air was freezing, unnatural. Erica's sleeping bag was empty. "Erica!" he shouted, bolting upright. "Erica!" Nothing but desert wind. He stumbled out of the tent and saw Lena standing behind the car, frozen. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the rear window. Jake followed her gaze. There it was, Erica, written beside Marcus's name. Same blood, same slashing strokes. They didn't speak for a long time. Later that day, desperate for answers, Jake got a signal just long enough to pull up a strange local forum post about ghost sightings on Route 311. The thread was old, buried deep, but it told a chilling story. Decades ago, a woman fleeing an abusive home abandoned her 3 orphaned siblings on that highway. She told them she'd come back with water. She never did. They were found days later, their bodies curled together beneath a dead mesquite tree. No water left, not even tears. Locals said their spirits stayed, hungry, angry. They only stop when they've taken 3. Jake looked up at Lena, pale as bone. 3, he whispered. She nodded. 1 more. They didn't dare stop driving, not even to eat. But every turn of the wheels made the car groan louder, as if the desert itself didn't want them to leave. That night they parked near a dry ravine, engine idling. Neither of them wanted to be the one to sleep. Jake took first watch. He saw them again around midnight, just standing in the headlights. 3 children. Marcus, Erica, and a more third smaller one Jake didn't recognize. But this time, they were smiling. He shook Lena awake. "Get in the driver's seat," he hissed. "I think it's me next." They switched places. Lena hit the gas. The children didn't move. She swerved around them. The car clipped something hard. Jake spun in his seat, but the children were garingun. The next morning, Jake was gone, too. Lena screamed until her throat bled. Jake's name was etched into the back window, in that same cursed handwriting. Now all 3 names gleamed under the morning sun, stained into the glass like a final warning. Marcus, Erica, Jake. Only Das Opum remained. She drove like hell, no stopping, no sleep. The fuel light blinked. Her limbs trembled, but she didn't care. She had to get out. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she saw it. A gas station, crumbling but real. She stumbled inside, crying. A weathered man behind the counter looked up. "You saw the kids, didn't you?" he said quietly. Lena nodded, sobbing. "You the last one?" She choked on her answer. "Yes." He stared out the window toward the highway. "They always take 3. Then they vanish for a while, but they always come back. Until the road gets more souls. Lena sat there until dawn. She never went back to that road. Years later, a hiker found her old car abandoned outside the station. Dust covered the windshield. But if you wiped it away, 3 names were still there, faint, but written in something dark. Marcus, Erica, Jake, and beneath them, a 4th name, Lena. Pine Creek Tunnel had always been a name whispered around campfires, a story passed down through generations of Appalachian families. It was a place few dared to visit, a place that had earned its eerie reputation through decades of unexplained disappearances. But for 5 friends, it was the ultimate challenge. They were thrill seekers, YouTubers with a passion for the paranormal, and Pine Creek Tunnel, sealed for years, was the one ghost story they hadn't conquered. The night was thick with fog, the kind that seemed to swallow sound as it rolled down the mountain roads. Miles from civilization, the winding path through the trees felt like the very edges of the world. At midnight, the friends arrived at the tunnel's entrance, a dark mouth carved into the mountain that seemed to inhale the light of their car headlights. "We're doing this, no turning back," Jason said, slinging a camera over his shoulder. He was the leader of the group, always looking for the next big thrill. His confidence, however, was beginning to falter as the cold night air settled around them. Lena, his girlfriend, adjusted her camera and shivered. "Just remember, it's not the dark that gets you. It's what's in the dark. Stop being such a buzzkill, Lena," Mark teased, ruffling her hair. Mark was the comic relief of the group, always ready to crack a joke. But even he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The tunnel's silhouette against the moonless sky seemed to beckon them. Their goal was simple: get footage of the tunnel, record some spooky sounds, and get out. But none of them knew that Pine Creek Tunnel wasn't just a spooky relic of the past. It was a cursed place, a place that had fed on the fear of those foolish enough to enter. Jason turned to the others. "All right, everyone, gather up. You know the plan. We head in, take some shots, then leave. It's just like any other haunted place we've been to." The others nodded, though the nervous tension in the air was palpable. Without another word, they grabbed their gear and walked toward the tunnel entrance. The walls of the tunnel were slick with moss, their dampness seeping into the ground beneath their feet. The smell of earth and decay filled their nostrils, and the further they walked, the colder it became. As they ventured deeper into the darkness, the light from their flashlights seemed to shrink, consumed by the tunnel's endless void. It was as if the tunnel was alive, stretching and bending in ways that didn't make sense. The flickering of the flashlight beams was the only thing keeping the shadows at bay. "Do you guys feel that?" Mark's voice trembled as he spoke. His words were swallowed by the oppressive silence that hung around them. "Feel what?" Jason asked, adjusting his camera. "The air. It's different. It's like it's closing in on us." "Yeah, well, it's a tunnel," Lena said, trying to mask her unease with humor. Tunnels are supposed to feel tight, but the deeper they went, the more claustrophobic it became. The walls seemed to close in on them, narrowing as though the tunnel was alive, pulling them further inside. Their phone signals cut out, the screens going blank. The only sound was the echo of their footsteps, amplified by the tunnel's unnatural acoustics. "Guys," Lena's voice was quieter now, barely a whisper. "I saw something." Jason stopped in his tracks. "What did you see?" Her flashlight shook as she pointed it ahead. "Over there, in the shadows. I thought I saw something move, someone." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was broken only by the sound of their shallow breaths. "I didn't see anything," Jason said, his voice tense, more frustrated than scared. "Let's just keep moving. We'll get something on camera. and then we can leave. But the further they went, the worse it got. Jason's flashlight flickered again, and the beam danced across the tunnel's walls. For just a split second, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A face. It wasn't a human face. It was twisted. The features were contorted into an expression of agony, the eyes black voids that seemed to follow him. Jason's heart pounded in his chest, and he turned away quickly, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lena was already backing away, her face pale. "I saw something in the walls. It's watching us." "Stop messing with us," Mark said, trying to laugh it off. But the sound of his voice cracked, betraying his fear. "We've all seen horror movies, okay? It's probably just shadows. You know, the light messing with our brains." But Jason was no longer laughing. He looked around frantically, his camera rolling as he scanned the darkness. That was when he heard it, a whisper. It was faint, like the rustling of dry leaves, but it was unmistakable, a voice, calling to him from somewhere in the darkness. The others heard it too, soft, pleading, almost familiar. "Jason," the voice moaned. It was a woman's voice, broken and full of sorrow. "Jason." His heart skipped a beat. It sounded like his mother, but his mother had passed away 5 years ago. He shook his head, trying to clear the thought. But the whispering grew louder, more urgent, as if the voice was drawing closer. "Jason." His name echoed through the tunnel, and it was followed by a new sound, a soft, rasping breath. Lena screamed. They turned, and in that split second, one of their group, Mark, vanished. One moment he was there, his face twisted in confusion. The next, he was gone. No sound, no sign of struggle. It was as if the tunnel had swallowed him whole. Mark, where are you?" Jason shouted, his voice cracking. They rushed to the spot where Mark had been, but there was nothing, no trace, only the stillness of the tunnel and the echoes of their panicked breaths. Lena was sobbing now, her flashlight flickering erratically. "We have to leave. We have to get out of here." But it was too late. One by one, they disappeared. First, Lena, then Jason's best friend, Ethan. Each time, a cold rush of air would whip through the tunnel, followed by the same eerie silence. The walls seemed to pulse and faces began to form in the stone, faces twisted in anguish, eyes pleading for release. Jason, the last one left, recorded everything. His own fear, his friends' disappearances, the endless whispers that filled the air. But the worst part came last. As he turned to flee, the tunnel's mouth suddenly sealed itself behind him. The stone slid into place, cutting him off from the outside world. He was trapped. His final moments were captured on the camera, the footage shaky as he stumbled through the dark. The last shot was of his face, pale, tear-streaked, and utterly broken, as the tunnel closed around him. The footage, later found abandoned near the tunnel entrance, sent chills through those who dared to watch it. It was a warning, though few understood it. Pine Creek Tunnel had claimed them all, and it would never let them go. No one ever came back from Pine Creek Tunnel. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly, a cracked and sunburned wasteland that shimmered under the late afternoon sun. Chris had been driving for hours, eyes gritty from the dry wind and throat parched despite draining 2 bottles of water. His road trip from Salt Lake City to Los Angeles had seemed like a fun solo adventure, until the highway emptied and his fuel gauge dipped below a quarter tank with no gas station in sight. Just as anxiety crept in, a faded sign emerged through the haze. Eagle's Nest Gas and Groceries, 1 mile ahead. Chris blinked. The letters were barely legible, sun-bleached and peeling. The arrow underneath pointed right toward a narrow, crumbling side road. With a muttered curse of relief, he turned. The station sat alone in a sunken lot, surrounded by dead brush and rusted road signs. A weathered building leaned slightly to one side, its roof warped like a melting candle. 2 gas pumps stood beneath a metal canopy, the kind with mechanical dials that clicked instead of digital numbers. The whole place reeked of a forgotten time. Chris parked and stepped out. The silence was immediate and unsettling. No insects, no wind, not even the hiss of a breeze. Inside the dusty station, a single overhead fan rotated slowly, despite the lack of sound from its motor. Behind the counter stood an attendant, a lanky man with slicked-back hair, wearing a red button-up shirt with a white name patch. Rick Hamadidwaber stitched over his chest. His clothes were out of a different era, maybe the late 80s. Rick stared straight ahead, unmoving, his eyes glassy and distant. Fill up on pump 1? Chris asked, already creeped out. Rick gave a small nod, still not meeting his eyes. Chris filled his tank. The gas smelled normal, but the nozzle was weirdly cold. When he came back in to pay, the register was ancient, manual crank and all. Rick held out his hand silently. Chris handed over a $20 bill. No receipt, no thank you. Just a wordless transaction in a ghost's skin. Chris drove away fast, gravel spitting from his tires. He didn't slow until the station was far behind him, shrinking in his rear-view mirror. Only then did he notice something off. The digital clock on his dashboard read 12:15, a time that hadn't changed since he'd pulled away from the pump. His phone screen was dark, refusing to respond. When it finally flickered to life, the date glared at him in bold white text. August 5th, 1991. Chris nearly swerved off the road. He pulled over, heart hammering. No signal, no GPS. Even the analog wristwatch he wore had stopped ticking. Breathing hard, Chris made a U-turn. He had to go back. But when he reached the turnoff, the gas station was gone. The road dead-ended at a patch of scorched earth. No building, no pumps. Just a blackened circle of ground, half swallowed by desert sands. He got out, disoriented. The dust was thick and lifeless. Kneeling, he brushed away debris, bits of charred metal, a fragment of red plastic that could have once been part of a gas pump. His phone finally got a weak signal. Desperate, Chris Googled Eagle's Nest gas and groceries, Nevada. One result, a local newspaper scan from August 1991. Gas station explosion kills 4. Investigators say faulty wiring likely caused the blast that destroyed the isolated Eagle's Nest service station. Victims included the owner Rick Gardner, 2 customers, and a drifter whose identity was never confirmed. The image showed a younger version of the man at the counter. Rick. Chris staggered back. He'd seen a ghost, or something worse. Back in the car, he tried driving forward, hoping to reach the next town. But the road twisted unexpectedly. It looked the same, yet different. The highway signs were older. The horizon shimmered with mirages of cars that disappeared when approached. He passed the same mile marker twice. Each time he drove forward, he circled back. Each time, the gas station reappeared. Now it looked newer, as if he were getting closer to August 5th, 1991. Inside, Rick still stood behind the counter, but this time he looked at him. "Still here?" he asked, voice dry and unused. "I'm trapped," Chris muttered. "What the hell is this place?" Rick didn't answer directly. "We all came through, same as you, running low, tired, needing a pit stop. But this station doesn't forget, not after what happened." Chris stared. "You died. You're dead." Rick gave a hollow smile. "So are you, or you will be, unless you stop it." "Stop what?" Rick's hand trembled slightly as he pointed to the back door behind the counter. "Go before the fire starts. It happens every time, but no one's ever made it to the breaker, not even me." Chris hesitated, then ran. The back room was filled with shelves of dusty inventory, Twinkies, canned beans, soda bottles with old labels. Past that, another door. Behind it, a staircase leading down. Smoke began to seep from the vents. Flames licked the floorboards. Chris ran faster, down into the dark, where a single humming fuse box waited at the bottom. His fingers shook as he flipped every switch. Nothing happened. The humming grew louder. Behind him, he heard footsteps, fast. Desperate, a young man burst into view. "Wait!" he shouted. "I've been trying for years. Let me." The floor exploded above them, fire pouring through like water from a broken dam. The man was incinerated instantly. Chris ducked, shielded by a concrete beam. And then, silence. When Chris woke, he was lying on the cracked highway shoulder. His car was parked nearby, still full of gas. The sun had just begun to rise. His phone worked again. The date read August 6th, 2024. Everything looked normal. Back home, Chris tried to find the gas station again. He drove through Nevada twice, retraced every step. It was gone, erased again. But sometimes, on long drives, when the desert is too quiet and the heat shimmers too strongly, he sees a faded sign in the distance. Eagle's Nest, gas and groceries, 1 mile ahead. And every time, his dashboard clock flickers. TH 12:15 a.m.